Hello and welcome to Google Firestarters. My name is Neil Perkin. I'm the moderator and the curator of Firestarters. And Firestarters is a series of video chats that we do with the interested and interesting of the advertising and marketing community, building off the back of about 60 live events that we did over the course of a decade at Google. And so I'm delighted to say that today's guest is both interested and interesting. So really happy to have Jim Carroll, who's the former UK chairman at BBH and brand and communications consultant. So Jim, would you care to just introduce yourself?
Yes, hello Neil, and I'm flattered to be asked. Thank you. Yes, I am Jim Carroll. I am a brand and comms strategist. I was a planner at BBH for 25 years. For some of that time, ran the planning function, and then I became UK chairman. Nowadays, I'm a sort of consultant as part of Carroll Jones, leading a project-based existence, and I also write a blog about creativity, culture, and commerce.
Brilliant, and a very good blog it is too. So recommend people to check that out. So as you know, Firestarters is structured around 5 key questions around learning and changes and predictions to the advertising marketing industry. So I'm just going to crack straight into the first question, actually, Jim, if that's all right. And so the first question is about learning, really, and what's the best thing that you've actually learned in your career? So I'd love to ask you that.
Well, I think my biggest learning was about leadership, and it was towards the twilight of my time at BBH that I was asked by the CEO, the UK CEO, Ben Fennell, what my point of view on leadership was. And I realized that having worked with, I thought, many great leaders over that time, I didn't have a theory of leaders. So I sat down like a good planner, and I tried to sort of analyze one by one the different leaders in both the agency and the client side that I'd worked with and admired. And I went through them. There's one that I particularly admired who was visionary, emotional, leading from the front, big picture of where the industry was going. There was another who was competitive, driven, objectives, goals focused. There was another who just made everyone feel great that worked on her team, just brought motivation into the room with her. There was another who was not someone who stood at the front of the stage. She sort of was more, we used to joke, she was the puppet master. She maneuvered people and relationships around to get to the best results. And then there was, Nigel Bogle, the founder, who I always thought of was like a philosopher king, a deep thinker about the nature of advertising and communication and brands. And so I plotted this picture of many different individuals and said, what do they have in common? And as I looked at them, I thought they don't really have too much in common at all. And I could sort of recommend perhaps to people wanting to be leaders that they should all have some of these qualities. They should be visionary and competitive and motivational and great at relationships and deep thinkers. But none of those individuals had all of those things. So it would be inappropriate to ask any young person to try and emulate all of those things. And so I thought a little more on it, and I thought maybe the thing that characterizes each and every one of them is that they had found a way of articulating their truest strengths, their real value, in a bigger, bolder fashion. And that's what leadership is. It's the ability to properly understand what your distinctive strengths are and to articulate those strengths on a bigger stage in a louder voice. And so I I went back to Ben and said that I believe that leadership is the amplified self, and that therefore our challenge as individuals in our career is to establish who am I, what makes me different, and to articulate that in a more compelling and authentic way.
It's really interesting. I mean, I love that thought. But if I could just maybe bring this to your time as chairman at BBH, I mean, what do you think were your distinctive strengths that you brought to that?
It's difficult, this, because I reflect on my appraisals, and I used to have my appraisals every year with the great Nick Kendall, and we did a proper 360-degree appraisal, and you would always skim past, or I would mentally skim past all the nice things, all the positive things, and I obsessed about the negative things, because partly I was slightly vindictive. I'd be thinking, who said that? I will find them. But also I think we all want to address the negatives. We become really obsessed, and with me back in the day, it would be he's not that great on effectiveness, he can't make Harvard graphics work, he's not great with relationships and things like that. And I would spend a year trying to get better at effectiveness, Harvard graphics, relationships, all those kind of things. And then I'd go and see Nick Kendall, and my feedback would be, you're not very good at effectiveness, Harvard graphics, and relationship. So some point in the middle of my career, I realized that I really had to stop trying to address those negatives. I mean, you always try and get them to a certain level, but I think the point at which you say, where am I really good, is the point at which your career, that's what happened with my career, is when I just said, I'm just going to stick to doing charts with oil paintings on them and coming up with stories that are only adjacent to the point I want to make. I'm very good at that.
Yeah, and I think I'd love to bring this into actually the skills of a good strategist and planner as well, because I have a lot of planners and strategists obviously in the audience for Firestarters. And I think you've talked before about how a good range of the things that you bring into the kind of process of strategy. And so you write a lot about culture and the relevance of culture. And I think you've written before about artists like Lee Krasner and so on being criticized for having too many styles. But in fact, actually, it's a really good lesson in creativity, because you don't have that singular philosophy. So you're able, like that kind of idea of broad and shallow planning, I think you've called it.
Yes.
So just being able to draw on many different things. So do you think that kind of diverse range is really important as a planner, as a strategist? Tell me a bit more about that.
Yes, I went to a Basquiat exhibition once, and there was a really compelling piece of film of Basquiat watching telly, and he was drawing as he watched telly, and it could be Mickey Mouse, it could be an interview, it could be the news or something, but he clearly needed input in order to create output. And I believe that planners need that. I think all creative people need that. You need stimulus if you're going to create anything challenging, different, etc. And my own personal enthusiasms are literature and art and music and so on and so forth. I don't demand that that's what every planner does. I think I just want every planner to have a life outside work. And sometimes the damage of overwork is that you're not getting the stimulus. So your hours in the office are longer, but your value to the office is diminished because you're not getting the stimulus. I once hired a charming bloke. It's a sort of mistake I made once, where I interviewed him in the pub, and he was such a charming individual in the pub. And then when I got him into BBH and was employing him day to day, he became rather kind of square and blocky in his thinking, and it was all very conventional. And I had to say to him, I want the bloke that I hired in the pub. I need your outside world in the office, because if all your reference points are just work reference points, they're too narrow and conventional and similar to everyone else's.
And there's an interesting sort of reference here to bring in, actually, because something else I'd read about what your kind of view on how strategists can best advise clients. And it was a really nice thought, actually, because I think I read that you thought originally your job as a planner was to be a strategic doctor. But actually, as in the client would come to you with a problem, you diagnose what was wrong and write a prescription, that kind of metaphor. But actually, you realize that you were a psychotherapist. So the job was actually to get the answers out of the clients, which is a very different thing. Tell me a bit more about that.
Yes, I think you've described my point of view very well, Neil. Actually, I just had a slight crisis moment in the middle of my career where I thought my clients are paying all this money for me to come up with my desperately insightful strategy for them, and then they would poo-poo it or disrespect it, and I wondered what my expertise was. And in fact, most of my clients, my clients had planning departments, they had strategists. So what was an advertising planner to do? And I found it very helpful to think, look, clients know their brands intimately. They live their brands day in, day out. And there's a real value in listening to key stakeholders, in hearing how they articulate their challenge and their vision for the brand, perhaps using some editing skills, some organizational skills to restructure and rephrase that. But I think, and I claim no knowledge on psychotherapy, but I think the idea that the answer to a client's problem is within themselves, and that we are trying to uncover the sort of the layers, doing a piece of mental archaeology, if you like, to get to the heart of what a brand represents. I found it much more compelling as a process. And I'd say actually later in my career, I think that becomes the strategist's skill, to spend time with senior clients and just listen, and to look for patterns, look for consistencies, focus on particular phrases and unpick those phrases. It's a much more rewarding way to think about our task than to see it as something clinical, detached, entirely objective, because I don't think it is.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And is there something here about the value of being an outsider? So I think you've talked a bit about that before now, but just being an outsider to that organization, and so looking at it, bringing in that kind of outside perspective, I suppose, but also just thinking about you're slightly detached from the kind of immersion that the client has in that brand. Do you think there's value in that?
And that's to be valued, that outside perspective. It doesn't mean that you're saying something completely new. You're just hearing things that maybe the client has not heard themselves say. And I used to say that actually great planners are outsiders who want to belong. I mean, I as a child was an awkward teenager. I had friends, I hung out with everyone, etc., but I never felt at the core of the community. And I think a lot of great planners are just slightly one or two steps outside of the herd, and that gives them the ability to observe. It gives them the objectivity that you're talking about. But I think also critically, what makes a great planner is that they are outsiders who want to belong. They have a yearning. When I was a kid, I used to curl my hair, and my mum took me to the barber's, and I had to have a crew cut. And it was like this very severe crew cut to stop me curling my hair. And you know, and I went to school, and of course I just stuck out like a sore thumb, because it was the 70s and everyone had long hair and I had this crew cut, and I thought, I wish I could just belong. I want to hang out with the other kids. So, and I think the desire to belong gives you the empathy. So you have the objectivity from distance, from being outside, but you have the empathy, the feeling for the masses, for the clients and for the consumers, because you want to be with them. If you were just an outsider, you should be an artist.
Right. Yeah. Fascinating. And so, if I may move on to the next question, I'd just love to ask you a bit about over your career. What was the biggest mistake in your career? What did you learn from that?
Well, again, I'll get to the point via a story, but at the back end of my time at BBH, I was invited to a 2-day seminar of very, very important commercial people. It was like the titans of industry. And there were 12 of us in one room for 2 days. And they were Richard Branson and Ariana Huffington and the CEO of Tom's, the founder of Tom's, and some bigwig at Goldman's. And I mean, initially, I'm just sort of thinking, what am I doing in a room with these people for this long, just having a chat about the future of work or something? And I thought I'll try and make use of this time and see if I can observe. I've got these amazing titans of industry. What makes a titan of industry? What is the secret? Because I've got a perfect little sample here. They're all amazing. They're all hugely wealthy and successful.
Yeah.
And I looked at them and I'm sort of going, right, okay, first things first. They're actually rather nice. They were pleasant. They chatted. They passed the sandwiches. They were charming, even though I wasn't important. And everyone was rather nice, I thought. And but then I sort of said, well, I've met a lot of nice people who are not titans of industry, so that doesn't help. And then I sort of was quite interested that they weren't talking in algebra or algorithm or some sort of abstruse technical language that I wouldn't understand. Actually, they spoke very plain, sensible business language, all very articulate, but not rocket science. They were not business rocket scientists. And so I'm left thinking, well, I've got 2 days, but I'm running out of time. What is it that unifies these people? And I noticed after a while that every time something needed doing, they would go, I know what to do. I'll get Sergey onto this. He's got a whole team of people that do this. And they go, I'll get on to Howard. Howard's very interesting chap, and he's got a division. I know he's the one to do this. Or they'd say, I don't quite know what this is, but I know some people who do. And I realized that what defined these people was they didn't feel the obligation to solve everything themselves. They always thought, who do I know that can make this happen, that can solve this, that can make this work? And I realized, because it was towards the back end of my career, I realized that this had been my greatest mistake, that I had always thought as a relatively academic kid, I must know the answer myself. I must solve it myself. And I think that I was wrong. I think that the world is completely interconnected and you need networks in a networked world. And the people that really thrive in business are the people that manage and work networks really well. And it made me think I'd always been dismissive of networking opportunities. And, they do that thing in the agenda that says, and now, a half-hour networking opportunity. And I think I'll have to spend that time in the loo or something, and looking back, networks are everything. Connections, knowing people through the business and the industry. You take them with you as you move on from one job to another. I wish I'd realised that sooner.
Yeah, I can definitely echo that. I think that's a great learning, and it's really interesting what you're saying there about just how leadership has really changed, really, and the kind of humility that you need as a leader now, just to say that I don't know, but we will find out. And the old idea of leaders needing to have all the answers at the top of the organisation and the answers flow down from the leadership is really quite sort of evolved on from that. We've moved on, haven't we? But
yes, I found there was a very helpful analogy I came across once that said leaders used to be engineers and now they are gardeners, and the engineer is just sort of working at the spokes and moving the units around and sort of twisting things, and he's the almighty sorting it all out, whereas a gardener is nurturing, is caring for different plants in different ways, is patient, is not looking for the credit themselves. They're sort of celebrating the success of the flowers and the flora and fauna and so forth. And I mean, that sounds very soft, but I think it's true. I think the engineer leader was right for the monolithic industrial age. But I think the gardener leader who nurtures and cares is right for a more interconnected world, technical age.
Yeah, fascinating. So can I bring this into the industry? I'd really love to get your perspective on how the industry is changing, I guess, and your sort of keen sight for that. So let me ask you that and bring that back into the advertising and marketing industry.
Yes. First things first. I mean, I'm not necessarily the person that you should ask about the future. You know, I'm the ghost of Christmas past. But I will give you some observations on this. I mean, when I was a kid, I was sat on the wall in Romford with my mate Andy, and nothing happened in the 70s. So quite often you just stared looking at the road, and I'm staring looking at the road, and I said to my mate Andy, have you noticed all the cars have started looking the same? They're sort of all blobs now. Whether it's a Vauxhall or a Ford or whatever, it's just a bit of a blob. And Andy said to me, he said, "No, well that's fine, Jim. That's the wind tunnel. All cars now, whichever the manufacturer, are put through a wind tunnel, and it makes them more efficient and more fuel efficient and sensible." And I said, okay, so that's why they all look the same. Is that entirely good? Is it entirely good that they all sort of look a bit bland and jelly-like and the same? And I was reminded of this conversation at the turn of the millennium when maybe one New Year's Eve or something, but I was looking at the ads on the telly and I said, blimey, they all look the same. The ads have started converging and they had the same scenarios and plots and insights and aesthetics and narrative structures and benefits and so forth. And I realized, going back to the office, that what seemed to be going on was that we were doing lots of very sensible professional things. At that period, at the turn of the millennium, there was a lot of professionalization of marketing, globalization of marketing, issuing of best practice ABCs and books and ring binders. There were special testing methodologies with norms and benchmarks and traffic lights, etc. And this was all with good intent, because it was trying to be more serious about marketing. We were trying to make marketing more of a professional activity. And my clients said, "I don't know why you're worried about this, Jim, because we're just doing this to raise the floor." And I said to the clients, I said, I do understand that you're raising the floor, but you also seem to be lowering the ceiling, because the work that gets through these processes and through these ring-binded codes, etc., tends to be of a particular consistent generic type. And so around about that time, I developed the view that there was a thing called wind tunnel marketing, that through good intentions, we were making brand communication more similar, and that we needed to introduce more difference, more disruption to our processes in order to get brand communication, brand essence, brand identity that was more interesting, memorable, etc., etc. Now, I feel that what we're going through now is like a second era of wind tunnel marketing, in that for all the best reasons, we have gone through a period of performance marketing, data analytics, dashboards and algorithms, etc., etc. We're building the perfect marketing machine. This is brilliant news. It means that we've got a more connected, more responsive, more agile, less wasteful kind of marketing process. But in building that machine, we may be losing something. And it's the fact that what happens in a few years' time, when we've all built the same machine and it's super efficient and it's super intelligent and it's super responsive, and we're sitting there, all our competitors, everyone looking at this machine saying, isn't it great? But it's the same as our competitors. And just as with the wind tunnel previously, we need to build some disruption into our own processes, build some difference into our brands. We need, sometimes I refer to it as, we need a ghost to animate the machine. And the ghost is the brand, it's our creativity, it's our style, it's our essence. And I feel that's the stage of evolution that we're at, and that's the challenge facing the industry.
Is this about the sort of diminishing returns that you can get from just driving efficiencies? And what you're saying there is that actually you need to be more disruptive and take that leap forwards sometimes, rather than just always focusing on optimization or efficiency.
Yes, the big leaps need big thoughts, and efficiency. Once you have a big thought, then you can maximize its potential brilliantly with all the tools that are available to us. But I think we, as an industry, we need to be dedicated to effectiveness and efficiency. And the effectiveness comes from big changing ideas, big transformative ideas. And I mean, I think that there's a curse in the creative business, unfortunately, which is that we are in a business called creative. And I used to ask my clients, what do you feel about these different words? And they would say, and I would say, what do you think about change? They say, love change, we manage change, we drive change. What do you feel about innovation? So innovation, magnificent. We've got departments that are innovating new categories, new brands, new everything. How do you feel about disruption? Love disruption, got to crack a few eggs, etc., etc. Transformation, love it. Difference, I don't know. I mean, difference is good and bad. Okay, well, let's say you're not so sure about, you don't want difference for the sake of it. How do you feel about creativity? Well, I feel it's something special, etc. But equally, I feel it's rather indulgent. It's soft. It's people giving each other awards. It's not commercial. Okay. How do you feel about risk? Risk, don't like it, diminish it, eradicate it, mistakes, don't like. Now, I always used to say to my client, the thing is though, that these words go to bed with each other at night. That creativity is risk management, it's innovation, it's driving change, it's disruption. but one word you don't like, or a few of these words you don't like, and some of them you do. And as I say, the curse of our industry is that we love this defining word, but it happens to be the word that our clients have often felt uncomfortable with. And it's a tragedy in a sense, because the new age, the new technical age, is all about change and disruption and innovation and difference. And we should, as creative thinkers, be helping to lead that change, drive that change, not put in a box called communication. We should be the people our clients turn to for disruptive change. And I'm not sure that's what we are. But therein lies the opportunity and challenge.
Yeah, there's a lot in what you're saying there. And I did pick out a quote, actually, which I think came from an interview that you did with the Marketing Society, I think. And you were talking about modern marketing leadership sometimes concerns itself too much with looking back at previous success and sideways at competitive activities. So is this really about the fact that actually the focus is in the wrong place?
I mean, yes. I mean, it's natural that whenever we work in a category, we look at best demonstrated practice, or we look at case studies. And I always used to be in awe of the American school of business that was so case study heavy. But I think it has led, when there's an over focus on case study, best demonstrated practice, you end up with people saying, can we just do what they did in our category? Can we do a Tesco or do a such and such? And I don't think that leads to seriously transformative businesses. And I don't think that's putting our thinking to best use. I mean, I think that you should come to a creative business for challenge, difference, innovation, not for best demonstrated practice. That's where you go to a management consultant.
Yeah, and I think you also said something interesting actually about the value of actually staying worried, I think, to thrive in the long term, as you put it. So that sort of it's healthy to be uncomfortable. Is there something about this in that? So just being always uncomfortable because you're always really pushing the boundaries and looking for the new and disruptive.
Yeah, I think that. I mean, my old boss Nigel Bogle used to say, at the height of our success, he'd say we're 3 phone calls away from disaster. And what he meant was he could get a phone call from BA, Unilever and Tesco or something, and we'd be shutting the doors. And so, but that's healthy. It's healthy to be worried. And I think that we rightly put a lot of focus in business on confidence, because I think obviously industry is fueled by confidence, but equally I think it's healthy to have the oils lubricated by fear and doubt and worry, and certainly in a massively transforming landscape, as every sector is at the moment, you just have to get up every morning worried about what's going on during the night.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that sort of leads us in nicely, doesn't it, to think about the future. So do you have a prediction about where the industry is heading?
Well, I don't think I can talk for the whole industry, but I would say that, because I think the whole industry is rightly obsessing about building the best marketing machines, etc., etc. But I can pick up on the point I made about the role of a creative business to build difference and change, and to be partners and consultants in change and difference for our clients. Is I worry that over the years, particularly given a kind of fee-based remuneration system, that we somehow gradually, without noticing it, moved from being a very premium added value service to being something that was slightly more commoditized. And sometimes I would look around the floors of the agency and say, there's almost too many young people managing processes here. There's not enough super talented people managing thinking and difference. And I would hope that the industry will evolve perhaps to have fewer but better people working for independent studios that are hugely valued by the clients, so that we are not seen as a volume business. We're seen as a premium added value service. And I think that's what it should be. It's you come to your agency not to get stuff. You come to get inspiration and ideas and difference. And we need, as a business, to just employ fewer, better people. We need to be more independent and more studio based than, I think, just acting as intermediates.
Yeah, there's an interesting dynamic here, I think, going on, isn't there? That perhaps smaller independent creative shops are able to handle global clients, and the dynamics seem to be changing slightly here. So, do you think there's an opportunity here really for that to sort of take the industry into a different era or different space, or what does that mean, do you think?
I think you're better at this than me, Neil. I'm not close enough. I mean, I feel in my bones that it needs that smaller consultancies, fewer people, but I'm not close enough to pursue that point.
Do you think, just to kind of pick up on something you were saying earlier on, and you talked a bit about boldness, I think, before, and sort of boldness in marketing leadership. And I think you talked before about sort of looking forwards to the possible, not backwards to the provable, just getting back to what you were saying before. And I'm just kind of thinking here about what that might mean in terms of how the sector itself is able to kind of shape itself around those possible futures, I suppose.
Yeah. Well, in the English Civil War, we had Roundheads and Cavaliers, and the Roundheads were super efficient, the new model army, and the Cavaliers were flamboyant, swashbuckling. I think we need a bit of both, and I think we've lost a lot of the Cavaliers. And some of the best clients I worked with were instinctive judges. They felt an answer was right. They trusted expertise. They had an instinct for the future that data couldn't supply them with. And I just think we need more Cavaliers throughout the industry, because the data on its own won't tell us about the future, whereas the Cavaliers, sometimes they may be really frustrating, but they feel it. And when everyone says artificial intelligence is going to take over the world, I always sort of think, well, it probably will take over the world, but the last thing it's going to take is my gut feel, my judgment, my emotional intelligence. And I know they've got machines that can do all that and that can paint Michelangelos and things, but it's the last thing that they will come for. And I think it's the best thing that we do.
Fantastic. So that brings us to our last question, which is my catch-all question really at the end. So I'd love to ask you, Jim, if I may, about what's the question that you wish that I'd asked you, and what's your answer to that?
Well, it's so nice to talk to you, Neil, because I'm a lonely old man now, sort of just living in Islington and don't get out very much. And I thought this is my opportunity to be like on Radio 4. And you could ask me about my inheritance tracks, like they do on Radio 4.
Yes.
I'm not sure how valuable this is for planners, but I'm just going to quickly tell you my inheritance tracks, because it's good for me. Is that okay?
That's fine.
What are your inheritance tracks, Jim? Well, my granny used to bathe me in a sink when we stayed with her. and she sang the old traditional folk song, "My Bonnie lies over the ocean, my Bonnie lies over the ocean, my Bonnie lies over the sea," and that goes deep into my fibre, and it talks of loss and sadness and distance, and maybe it talks about what we've just been through for the last couple of years. But I love that. That's what my family gave me. And then when I got married, I always liked the first dance. You should never throw away the first dance tune. And we played Leroy Hudson, All Because of You. Leroy Hudson was sort of in the community of Donny Hathaway, and he would have been classed alongside at one time Marvin Gaye and stuff like that. And it was the pinnacle of a sort of sophisticated soul, swooning strings, funky bass, uplifting brass, and I want you, I need you, and I'll do anything. Don't think I won't. It's just lovely. So, and that's what I would pass on to future generations. There's a very good YouTube of it in Soul Train. So that's it. My inheritance tracks.
Fantastic. What a brilliant question and wonderful answer. So that brings us to the end. I think we've run out of time, unfortunately, Jim. I could talk to you all day, but thank you so much for being a part of Google Firestarters. It's just been brilliant to have you on. And for everyone watching, don't forget, of course, to share the video and also just check out the other episodes in the series. So thanks again to Jim. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Neil. I thoroughly enjoyed it.